This module will discuss measurement issues in early childhood education. You've probably heard about some of the issues involved when it comes to measuring how well students are performing. Young children pose additional challenges to assessment. Let's explore what they are. Many of the characteristics that make young children endearing also make it difficult to get a solid grasp of how they are developing. It is very important to understand the child you are assessing. Young children typically have short attention span, and their moods may vary at any given moment. They may respond in unpredictable ways to new situations. It may take a while for them to warm up to new faces or unfamiliar situations, and they might be willing to demonstrate a skill with one person but not another. The rapid growth rate often causes them to tire easily and require naps one or more times a day. In addition, there are some of the world's best grazers needing small meals and snacks throughout the day. And when they are hungry, it is really hard to focus. Because of their young age, they do not feel burdened by the constraints of social rules. And the younger the child, the easier it is for them to do only what seems attractive for them at the moment. They are easily overwhelmed by their physiological needs. When sleepy or hungry, it may be tough for them to cooperate. These characteristics point to the danger of using information from a brief interaction with the child to make important decisions. It can be difficult to get an accurate picture of what a child can do. In addition to the characteristics of the young child, another challenge to assessment is diversity. A culturally different child is one who lives in a home where the customs and values may be very different from the majority of the children in the social group they are being compared to. Sometimes children may have been raised in another country. Different cultures vary quite a bit in terms of how they communicate politeness and respect. In the Latino culture, direct eye contact may be interpreted as challenging. In mainstream American culture, not having direct eye contact often leads to the conclusion that someone is not trustworthy. In some Asian cultures, a child who calls attention to oneself by raising one's hands or volunteering information is considered forward and immodest. In mainstream American culture, this is viewed as appropriately demonstrating one's ability. And if you don't raise your hand, some people might see you in a number of ways. You might be considered withdrawn or slow or disinterested. So as you can see, there is evidence that different cultures reinforce different skills and values. So if you are working with a child from another culture, it is important that you have a sense of that culture so that you can better interpret what you observe. Tests often provide results in the form of comparisons with other children of the same age. If a child's language and culture differs from those of the children he or she is being compared with, the comparisons may suggest conclusions that are not accurate. For example, if a child does not understand English well, test scores likely will not accurately reflect what they know or are able to do. It is possible that someone might inaccurately conclude that the child has a problem in the area measured by the test when the issue is one of language. Test items may also relate to experiences that are unfamiliar to a culturally different child. For example, in some cultures, children are taught to respond to adults with short answers. If a test requires this culturally different child to provide a lengthy description, then she may appear not to be doing well. Anytime a test is going to be used with an English language learner or a young child from a different culture, it is important to ask the following questions. Is the test being given in the language that the child understands best? Does the test take into account the child's cultural background? Does the test compare the child to other children from the same cultural group? Does the person working with the child have training and experience with the child's language and culture? Is other information besides test scores going to be used in making decisions about the child? One of the biggest challenges to assessment with young children is incomplete information. All of the issues just mentioned, the characteristics of the young child, short attention span, being less aware or concerned about social rules, being uncomfortable around strangers, or coming from homes with different languages and customs, all create a major threat to your ability to gather good information. Too often, decisions are made on the basis of incomplete information. This can result in bias or a lack of objectivity, where we use our own value system to interpret what we see. We need to avoid this. Other challenges include not obtaining sufficient information to get a clear picture of the child. Finally, it is important to look at the context in which we are gathering data. Would a child be able to perform a task if it were more child-centered? Is there something about our classroom or about how we have structured our instruction or classroom day that may be influencing the child's performance? Assessment strongly influences how teachers teach and how students learn. This makes assessment a crucial topic. The first challenge is that assessment practices are difficult to change, but if they remain unchanged, important aspects of a new or emergent learning culture are in danger. This is one of the issues we are seeing in K-12 education today. Because of the popularity of state and district assessments, more educators are feeling pressure to narrow the curriculum and focus more specifically on the areas emphasized on those tests. The second challenge comes from developments in society and the expectations that result from those changes. As one example, the internet has incredibly changed how children, and adults as well, learn and seek out information. Information is more accessible and obtained more informally. Because of these major changes, many of the methods previously used to evaluate learning are not as useful, but we still need to know about students' knowledge and skills obtained. So, we will need to be developing effective alternative assessment strategies so that we can do this. The third challenge is the importance of alignment or congruence of theories of learning and assessment. We are constantly finding out more about how learning occurs through research. But again, there can be a gap between those theories and the theories used with traditional assessment practices. So again, we need to identify alternative techniques that are consistent with new developments. Once these are developed, the fourth challenge is to make sure that teachers are able to use these techniques effectively to both obtain information as well as to use that information to make a difference in children's learning. Now that we have discussed the challenges of assessment, how should we deal with these challenges? During this course, you will be hearing the term multiple windows or use multiple points of data. When working with young children, it is important that you view the child using multiple windows. What does this mean? Well, it means that you use data from different points in time and in different settings, also known as multiple points of data. If the data shows similar behavior over time, then you can reliably conclude that the skill is present, regardless of the challenges mentioned earlier. If the information indicates that sometimes the skill is being demonstrated and other times not, you will want to dig a little deeper. You will want to look at the information more closely to see if there are any patterns you can identify for when the behavior is occurring. For example, is a child more likely to participate in circle time if he is able to sit next to a friend? The idea of multiple windows is one we will come back to, but keep in mind that it applies to using different types of information to help you better understand the child. What is needed then is information that is accurate, trustworthy, and dependable. Using assessment terminology, assessments should be reliable, valid, and fair. These are terms that often are used with traditional or formal assessment, but they also apply to classroom assessment. We will revisit reliability and validity in Chapter 10 in our textbook in a future lesson. So what do we mean when we say results of your classroom assessment should be reliable? It means that they should be reproducible. You should have confidence that the child will demonstrate similar performance at another time or place, or even with a different teacher. So it is important to be in tune with the children in your class. Your text gives a good example of this. In this example, the teacher has been gathering information and notes that one of the children was not interacting much that morning. She compares that to what she sees on a typical day and decides that the information for that child was not reliable because it does not capture his normal behavior. The option: gather more than one measurement of the same behavior and don't use information you don't believe is accurate. An assessment should measure what it is intended to measure. So, if you are measuring a child's performance on math word problems, you want to make sure that language is not an issue for the child. Why? If the child does not do well, you will not be able to determine if the child did not do well because she has poor problem-solving skills or because she did not understand what was being asked. You also want to make sure to measure what matters. Is the information important? Is it necessary to extend learning? Additionally, you want to make sure that the child has had an opportunity to learn what is being assessed. A child who has never used a balance beam would not be expected to have a perfect performance the first time out. But you can certainly use this information to provide opportunities for learning. How can you make sure that your assessment is reliable and valid? First, go back to multiple windows or multiple points of data. Namely, you need to make sure that you obtain enough samples of behavior to be confident in your interpretation. Again, information should be obtained using different methods and in different settings. You should not overemphasize one type of information over another. Make sure the information obtained from these multiple windows is consistent. Finally, make sure that your techniques are measuring what you want them to measure and not something else. One more consideration about assessment is fairness. This is an emotional issue. We want to make sure that our assessments are not biased against children who are not of the dominant culture or language, or biased against low-income families. There are 3 conditions in fairness of assessments. 1, children with disabilities. 2, children who need a challenge. And 3, children from diverse social, cultural, and linguistic backgrounds. Your textbook does a nice job covering the topic of reliability, validity, and fairness. Make sure to read it closely.